Hi everyone, it's Rax. Patch 1.1.1.1.1.1 just hit, however many ones there are, and they buffed the density in the nightmare dungeons. So what I did was I took my druid and I ran every single dungeon and I just blasted all day. And in some cases, I ran the dungeons multiple times. And if I ran them multiple times, I took the average to figure out exactly what are the absolute best dungeons to run and how do they compare to the data that I ran last time. Let me tell you a little bit about this data here and I'll show you the results right away. So, first of all, when I ran it last time, I ran it on a very, very, very weak sorcerer. Um, the and the reason why I thought that was perfectly fine to make a tier list before was because, well, when you're starting out a season, you're not going to have a very powerful character. Sorcerers aren't that good, so it's actually the perfect estimation. Now that people are getting farther into the season, they're getting a little bit stronger. They're getting their Paragon boards filled out. They're getting their full builds made. So now I tested it with a very powerful Tornado Druid. So that's one thing that's going to change the data significantly. The next thing is Blizzard buffed the density in dungeons, and for the most part, the buffs were pretty uniform. But there is one dungeon in particular, I call it Dopamine Tunnels, which people were saying was the new best dungeon in the game. So what I did was just delete these two things. We don't need these columns anymore. So what I did was I ran them again to compare them to see what we would have. Another thing that I did differently is I changed the penalty that you're getting for, let me say it again. I normalized all the XP based upon the level difference for the new structure that Blizzard has in the game. So, for example, you get 1.5% extra XP per level up to 10 levels. So, I took that as a penalty out of the data to normalize it so all the data would be ran at about the same level. Now, there is one thing that this data doesn't consider, which is the base monster XP changes as the level changes, but I don't know how to calculate it. And second of all, I think that the difference is so insignificant, and especially from what I saw in the data, doesn't make a whole lot of difference. Finally, there's one more thing that I added into the data, and that's a loot time. If you've ever watched me play Diablo, I loot and first of all, I pick up way less items than almost every player. And the amount of time that I spend looting is way lower than the average player. So I just built in a flat 60 seconds after every dungeon. You look through your items, you salvage them, you put them away, and you go to the next one. Seems to be reasonable. Now, the reason why this is important is because this is going to give um, without this penalty in there, it's going to give a big advantage to the very quick dungeons, and the very long dungeons are not going to get quite the same penalty. The items that drop are different with different densities in the different dungeons. I understand that. Can't really account for that unless I go and count the items that drop. That's doesn't make sense. Of course, skip the pylons, skip the events to normalize it. Anyway, that's enough talking. You get it. It's data, okay? I ran it all, and what do we have here? The 1.1.1 Nightmare Dungeon tier list. The best dungeon by far, I tested it multiple times, is certainly, without a doubt, Older's Cave. If you're the glyph leveling tier list does matter a little bit, kinda, but also not really, because if you just run Nightmare Dungeons, like Blizzard wants you to, from like level 55 to 100, every single one of your main glyphs that you pick for your build will be level 21 by the end. It's pretty much impossible to not get them that way. They'll get that way actually by like level 90. So you have 10 levels to spare. So this should never really come into play unless you have changed your mind on builds like 15 times while you're leveling up. And Older's Cave is just the very best. A lot of the usual suspects are here in S tier. The really, really surprising one is, again, the dopamine tunnels. In one of my previous tier lists, there's a fly here. In one of my previous tier lists, I actually had dopamine tunnels as the very worst dungeon. So it didn't just get like a normal density buff, it got a colossal buff from Blizzard because it went from bottom of the barrel to S tier. And so, yeah, the main thing to take from these tier lists is which ones do you salvage? So all of these down here, you can salvage. Hall, I know these dungeons. I ran them a million times. Halls of the Damned, Path of the Blind, Heretics, Faceless, Shifting City, and Bastion. I hate these dungeons. Another one that I hate is Corvalar. Corvalar has Free the Prisoners in the beginning, and you can go the wrong way. I hate Betrayer's Row as well. I, I hate all these C tier dungeons as well. So if you can, try to salvage really everything in C tier and the salvage tier and just keep running all of these. And I promise you, not only your quality of life, but also your XP is going to go up significantly. You should always run the S tier dungeons, especially because Blizzard has gotten rid of Resource Burn, Backstabber, and Cold Enchanted. They're three of the worst affixes. They're not in the game anymore. If you find them on a key, it's an old key. I didn't find a single one with any of those affixes in the game today. Testing it. So this is the new tier list, guys. I always update this particular sheet. I'm going to use this for the entirety while I cover D4 for however many years that is. Another thing I'm going to do soon is I'm going to go into the season 1 leveling guide and I'm going to make it a little bit better. This leveling guide is still very good, but they've changed some things about the game that they didn't really document. So there's some different ways that you can level up. I actually just set my PB fastest leveling ever a few days ago, and I'm going to keep practicing, get it faster and faster. And I did it with Sorcerer. So lots of things to test here. But in general, best a lot of the same best ones from the previous tier list are still at the top. A lot of the worst ones are still at the bottom. All of these are just absolute garbage. I skip these all the time whenever I can. I don't like Stockades either. Stockades also sucks. I don't really like Collapse Fault either, but all of these are pretty good, especially Older's Cave. And Hoarfrost is really fun because you can get it done in like 5 seconds. Anyway, that's the tier list, guys. I think my methodology is a lot better. My data is better as well because I'm running it on a very consistent character. And for some of them, I ran it multiple times. This is a good example of why the base monster XP differential doesn't really matter. I actually got higher XP per hour doing the 2 than the 9 after I normalized it. So it can't be that much of a difference. Anyway, guys, this is the list. The sheet will be down below. I hope this helps you. Salvage the C and the salvage keys and blast the other ones, and you're going to fly to 100. I got a lot more videos coming, a lot of build guides. I'll teach you everything about the game. Thank you.